Hey everyone, Cahlen here, and a viewer purchased the magneticulture magnet that I'm going to be doing experiments with for me and made the request that I make a video teaching how to play the Pennywhistle. So basically that's what this video is. This is what I carry my Pennywhistle in. This is a 3D printed case that someone made. Got it online somewhere a long time ago. And this is the Pennywhistle. So this is made out of carbon fiber. Kind of my theme. My staff is made out of carbon fiber. My fishing pole is made out of carbon fiber. And maybe someday even my bike will be made of carbon fiber, but that's fairly expensive. So anyways, this is the whistle. Basically you've got the top here, which is where you blow into. And then you have the holes. There's a hole in the bottom there. And then you have the holes for your fingers. There's 6 of them. So basically like this. And you're mostly holding the Pennywhistle with your mouth, right? So sometimes you have to open up all of your fingers, and a lot of the keeping it in place, because this keeps it in place, so if you have to take your fingers off, you're not keeping it in place as well. A lot of that is with your mouth, but also you have your thumbs down here on the bottom, like this. And I hear that professional whistlers say you shouldn't do this, but I like to have my pinky down here where there's no hole holding it basically when that's happening. So when I'm playing that note, everything's very secure, okay? Let's talk about first, I guess the notes. And basically Pennywhistles come in a certain note, right? So I don't remember what this is. This is probably a D Pennywhistle. Basically, whatever note it is the note that it will play when you close all the holes. So it's basically the note of the full length of the whistle. So that's what this whistle is identified by. Whatever that note was, I don't remember what it is. Okay, so that is the root note, which means it's the starting note and it's the ending note, and it's also kind of the goal note because the root has an octave, which is the same note, but it's higher. It also has an octave below it, which is the same note, but half the frequency. So the octave is twice the frequency. So if the root is 100 hertz, the octave is 200 hertz, and the lower octave is 50 hertz. So that's just kind of, notes are ingrained in the universe, okay? And it's not just how a note relates to itself, it's how all the notes relate to themselves. How all the notes relate to the root, basically, is kind of what music is all about. So a song generally starts on the root note and it ends on the root note, and it's constantly going back to and setting out from back and forth, back and forth, back and forth the entire song. And that's basically what the song is. It's like a story of how it goes from its starting point, gets to new heights, new octaves higher up, and new lows, new octaves lower down, and how it basically will end the song, settling where it is. And within every single little measure or phrase of a song, it's basically repeating that type of thing. Every phrase is going to have its own little story about how it's going from the root or from another one, but you can get you can get multiple layers, so a phrase will no longer be starting on the root. It'll start on the 5th or the 3rd or something like that, but it's always eventually going to go back to the root. It just may start a new game somewhere where it's kind of trying to settle its home base on a different note for a little bit. So hope that's not too complicated. I am planning to make a video about music theory sometime soon, where I'm trying to help people understand this stuff, because it really is important. And the musical system with the musical notes A, B, C, D, and E, and F, and all of that type of stuff, where you have to learn all the notes in each scale and you have to remember each specific one. Basically, it ruins music, because music is intuitive. You already understand the root and thing and all of that already intrinsically inside of you. You couldn't talk about it. You probably never thought about it. But even when you're speaking with someone, you're doing that. A spoken sentence is a musical phrase. It is. Listen to it. And what notes you choose are relaying information, and that information is based on basically math. These notes are mathematically derived from whatever root note you're using, the relationship to the root, and is always the same no matter what note you're starting on. So anyways, I'm not going to ever teach you things in terms of A, B, C, D, and F, because it fucks with your brain and makes you hate music because it's hard and you don't understand it. But it's not like that, okay? So it's always about starting at the root, okay? So if you were going to play major scale, which is all the notes in that song that can be played, but you're going to play them in order up and down. That's what a scale is, okay? If you're going to play a positive one, they call that generally a major. There's lots of variations, but kind of the basic major scale on a Pennywhistle is you start with all fingers down, you go up, you just lift a finger, you lift a finger, you lift a finger, you lift a finger, you lift a finger, then you're open, and then you start back down where you started, and basically that's the full scale. Okay, so let's play that. This is a major scale starting with all fingers down. And you notice the octave, the root and the octave were the same fingering, right? The only difference is how hard you're blowing. It's kind of hard to do. I'm surprised I pulled that off. I will say, for those technical people about the Pennywhistle, that when you get to this fingering at the octave, they say you should lift this finger. I don't like to do that. I learned about that after I'd already taught myself the Pennywhistle just naturally, never actually looking up lessons. It's still the same note, it's just less likely to make it chirp. Like if you don't blow at the right amount, you blow a little too much, it'll make it chirp instead of the note that you want. And apparently lifting this finger makes that less likely to happen on the octave. I don't do that. I might do it someday, but it's just more complication, and I like to keep things as simple as possible. So anyways, that's the major scale. And then if you wanted to play a minor scale, and this is what I prefer to play, there's many reasons, but basically I feel more in tune with minor scales. They're more interesting. I consider major scales to be boring. And also another benefit is you start up at a higher note. This is now the root of this song. That's going to change how all the relationships of the notes are to that note as compared to this, okay? So because I'm starting here, it means I can drop down to the note below the octave for a little bit of an effect, which is something actually really useful for a lot of reasons. And there's a lot of songs you won't be able to play if you're not able to drop one step down, because it's a very common thing to do that, right? So like that song starts by going down first rather than going up first. Going up first is generally the most common way to start, but you can do that, and if you're going to go down, then the next note down would be generally the one you would go down to, okay? So anyways, those are the reasons why I like the minor scale, mostly because it's just more interesting. So let's play that. This finger up, this is the root. Now, this one is not as simple as the other one because there is a half hole going on here. So when I got to this note, and then I went up to the next note would have been open holes, right, if we were talking about the last scale. But actually the next note is half of this hole. So I'm actually just rolling my finger so that half of the hole is open, okay? So I'm going to put my finger over the hole and I'm going to roll it to kind of go up to the next note just to show you what that sounds like. Right, so that's a whole step. That's a whole step, and it's generally kind of in the major type feeling, right? It's a positive, but the going just a half step up from that note is going to be more interesting, I would say. So anyways, that's another reason why I like the minor scale. So let's talk about one other thing that's kind of getting into music theory a little bit, but I think it's important. So basically, think of it, you start at the root, your goal is to get to the octave. This is a very simple way of thinking about it. It gets more complicated. To get to the octave and then come back home, okay? But during that journey, there are certain notes which are, all the other notes are different, and they're less stable and they don't feel quite like home, but some of them feel like more home than other ones, okay? And certain notes are the most homey without being the actual root, okay? And that would be the fifth, which has uplifting, forward moving, upward moving feel, and then there's the fourth, which is equally as balanced as the fifth. They're kind of the two middle points. So we got the root, we've got the octave, and we have a perfect split, which is actually, if you play the note right in the middle, that's called the devil's note. It's the most discordant note you can play. It was actually against the law to play that at some point in a theocratical government at some point a long time ago, because it was considered to be evil, and if you play them, you'll see it. But basically, on either side, like gatekeepers of that hellish world, musically represented, is the two notes which are not the octave, the root, or the octave, but they're the most stable and safe feeling. And these notes can feel like kind of like I was talking about earlier, a new starting point, a stable point in the middle of your journey. You may have not gotten where you're going to go, but you've gotten to a nice place where you can settle and relax and regain your energy, right? So that's what the fourth and fifth are. Okay, so the fourth and fifth are these. When I'm playing the minor scale, which I'm always going to do generally, it's going to be these two notes. So this is the fourth and this is the fifth. Okay, these are kind of the middle points, the resting points. But the fifth is going to have we're going to keep going up, and the fourth has more of like, we're going to kind of go back down now. That's kind of the general feeling of these things. Okay, so I'm going to play the whole scale, stop on the fourth, and then stop, play a long fourth and play a long fifth, just to give you a sense, and then I might finish the scale. Okay. And then there's the next kind of more stably notes would be the third. So that's in a chord, which is where you play multiple notes together. Generally, you're playing the root, the most basic chord, the root, the fifth, and the third. Okay, so that's generally what a scale is. So I'll play those three notes. I can't play them all together for you, but you'll just have to like merge them in your brain. You've heard a chord. If you've heard any song, you've heard a chord. Well, not any song, but most songs. Okay. So that's the root, the minor third, right, because we're in a minor scale. And then we go up to the fifth, which is the next stable point. Now, if we were going to continue, we would go up to the octave, so I'll just throw that in. Okay, and we'll do it with I'll play the positive third just so you guys have a sense. We'll play the root and the third of a major scale, and then the fifth. I think the fifth is this one, it must be. Okay, and then there's other notes. There's the second, and there's the seventh. And this is getting too complicated, I think. But root, octave, and all the notes in between, right? And you got the fourth and the fifth up here. You've got the third and the sixth. They're kind of mirrors of each other. And then you've got the second and you've got the seventh. Okay, these are also kind of mirrors of each other. So the second, the third, the sixth, and the seventh, they all have a major and a minor version. So, right, when I switch between a major and minor scale, positive and a negative scale, positive feeling emotionally, the third was the major third in the major song, and the third was the minor in the minor song. It's one of the aspects that makes it a minor. There's a couple other notes. The sixth, which is the half hole that I did, that was the minor when it was a half hole, but if I open it all up, it's the major, okay, in that scale, right, if you start here. It's different if you start here, right? It's all about where you start. The notes are all identified relationally to where you start. It's not about A, B, C, D, and E, and F, and all that type of bullshit. I have a lot of upsetness about how music has been fucked up through the education system through many hundreds of years, and it happened in many different ways, not just with the A, B, C, D, and F stuff. But I'll talk about that in another video. So let's see, is there anything else you need to know? So I guess I would just say general advice for playing. I would say just pick a scale that you want to play with. You want to play in the minor or the major. If you want to play in the major, always start here and then move to another note. Any other note, just pick a note. Any other note you want to move to, and then after that, pick another one. And you'll start to, first of all, you'll recognize that when you start a song and then go to another note, that there's songs that maybe you remember, which all do that. And at that point, if you want to play other songs, you can kind of go through that process of just feeling it out and learn that song. You don't have to play the song in the key. That song is really just about the relationship, the ratios of in frequency of those other notes to its root. And yeah, they generally will start a certain song in D or F or whatever like that, but you don't need your instrument. If you're playing by yourself, you don't need your instrument to do that. You're just going for the ratios, okay? So if you want to play a song that you've recognized, just kind of envision the song, start at the root, and try and get that first ratio right of the first note to the next note, and then keep doing that. And as you play this more and more, you'll just be able to sit down and play something without even having to work through it, right? I'm not to that point, but that is a place that you will get to. So pick a major or minor. Generally, most songs are going to be in one of those two. If you go into the world of like Hindustani music and stuff like that, you get into some pretty complex scales. For example, they will play the major on the upward and they'll play the minor on the downward of a certain note. And that's how their scales aren't just the same notes up and down, okay? So they have all kinds of different, they have like multiple times more scales, and their music is much more interesting and enjoyable to listen to for that reason, okay? But anyways, basic music, these two scales, you're pretty much going to be able to find anything. And if it doesn't feel like you're quite able to get the note that you're looking for by playing that basic scale, try going half whole, right? So this is another place where you can half whole, right here. So that's switching on the minor scale, that's switching between the major and the minor third. So the first one was the minor third, and the second one was the major. So I'll do that again. So if it's not fitting, and sometimes songs will throw in a note that doesn't fit in their scale, and that's a pretty common thing. It's generally done rarely in a song because you're using it for effect in a certain moment to throw something kind of, whoa, that's weird. That wasn't what I was expecting. So if you're trying to play a song that you like and you can't hit the notes, just try the half holes of the various ones, right? So anyways, I think that is basically all I can think to talk about. This is made by Eric the Flute Maker. I think it's E-R-I-K. Yeah, so he actually carves it in there. And I got this in 2019. He carved the year on there. He makes these. They're not too expensive. They're probably over $100 or something like that. But I think it's worth it. Basically, when I was a professional oboist in my youth, my oboe was like $4,000. And back then, that's a lot cheaper. It'd probably be close to $10,000 right now. I played a very nice oboe, but so seeing this as being $100 feels to me like a complete steal. So this is a nice thing to have, especially if you're living like me, because you can entertain yourself and keep your spirits up. You can use it to basically play in a public place to get money. Like for example, if you don't go on the central bank digital currencies, if you decide not to do that, you might have a hard time at a certain point even going into a grocery store and getting food. You may need someone to go in and get food for you. And maybe one way to convince them is to put a sign up with the food that you want and play your flute for people. So that's at least an idea I have. I'm sure that it may be useful for some other people out there. So, and also the nice thing about a carbon fiber wood, if you got a wood one, you have to be careful about humidity and keeping it dry, not drying it out after you're done with it, because or getting too cold and all this type of stuff, because you can crack the wood or you can rot the wood and all that type of stuff. So, and also metal can get nicks in it and bend very easily, because a Pennywhistle is not going to be a very thick piece of metal if you're getting a metal one. And so basically carbon fiber is going to be pretty sturdy. The only fragile thing is the plastic up here, which I have broken before by keeping in my backpack, which is why I got this case. So basically I'm never going to have any problems. So anyways, that's the penny whistle. That's how to play the penny whistle. I don't think I left anything out. I can't think of anything. So anyways, hope that's useful. And yeah, I'll put a link to one of these if this is what you want, but you can just search penny whistle or tin whistle, and they're all over the place, and you can get some for pretty darn cheap. You know, I'd guess probably sub $20. I haven't looked, but I would guess that you can probably get a pretty cheap one. So, and it probably is going to sound pretty good. You know, it's probably not going to sound that much different than this. So, okay, I figured I should probably play a song, and this is basically going to demonstrate a lot of the stuff I talked about. How it's going to start on the root, and the whole song is going to end on the root, but kind of in the middle, we're going to stabilize. We're going to have a new starting point at the fifth, as the second phrase, and then we're going to return to the first phrase again to finish the song, where we're basically at the root again. Also, I'm going to be showing how dropping down, the song starts dropping down, and also I drop down below the root several times, so that's another benefit of being able to have a note down below, right? That's the downside of starting in a major scale, is you got nowhere down to go, so you lose that whole anchor, that whole pivot point. So anyways, yeah, so I'll just play the song. I have played this song before, but I haven't practiced this in a long time, and this is basically the song that I never will forget how to play. So I'm going to play this song. So this is called Ron Fower. It's basically based on a virtual forest in a video game that I used to play. Now we're going to switch to being based on the fifth. So we started and we ended on the fifth there, in that whole phrase. That whole phrase was based in the fifth. It was like the new root within the first root. Now we're going to go back to the first root in the first phrase to finish the song. See you later.